Hello and welcome everyone to the latest Reuters Events webinar. Today we're going to be talking about sustainability and Scope 3 emissions in global supply chain. We're going to be exploring this critical role of Scope 3 emissions in our sustainability efforts. As supply chain professionals, understanding these emissions is key to driving impactful change. Now, I want to begin with some definitions, just so that we're all clear going forward. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from own sources, so like company vehicles and facilities. Now, when we think about Scope 2 emissions, those are the indirect emissions from purchased electricity and other utilities. And Scope 3 emissions that we'll be talking about today include all other indirect emissions in a company's value chain, such as purchased goods and services, business travel and employee commuting, waste disposal. Think about how your products are sourced and manufactured before they get to your organization, and then how they're used and disposed of after you've sold them on. And of course, critically today, transportation and distribution. So Scope 3 emissions often make up the largest portion of a company's total greenhouse gas emissions. Addressing them is crucial for reducing overall environmental impact. And collaboration with suppliers and partners is essential in tackling Scope 3 emissions. So by working together, we can implement effective strategies to measure, manage, and reduce Scope 3. Throughout this webinar, we'll discuss best practices and hear from some industry experts that you can see there in front of you on how to confront that Scope 3 reduction challenge. Thank you for joining us. Let's work together towards a more sustainable and responsible supply chain. Now, before I get on to introducing this amazing lineup that we've got here, I want to make sure our audience feel like they're included in this discussion. This is an interactive webinar. It's something we really prioritize at Reuters. And so we're going to begin with a poll. Now, I'm going to launch this poll now. And the question today is, what is the biggest obstacle to tackling Scope 3 emissions across a company's supply chain? And there are 5 options. I can see one person's gone straight in there with associated costs are too high. But there is also poor network visibility, lack of internal support, lack of cooperation from partners and suppliers, and insufficient expertise. So I'm going to let those votes go on that poll for a while as I turn to this amazing lineup of industry experts that we've got here today and start off with some introductions. Can I begin with Vincent? Vincent, would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Vincent Golubiowski. I'm the global lead for supply operations at Tapestry and also the CFO for all supply chain activities. You probably know Tapestry through his brand, Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. We are a global house of brands in the fashion luxury area.
Amazing. Thank you, Vincent. And Roberta, could I come to you next, please?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Roberta Barbieri, Vice President of Global Sustainability for PepsiCo, one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. My remit at PepsiCo includes our climate change program across all of our scopes, both mitigating emissions and adapting to the risks that climate change poses.
Thank you, Roberta. Christine, could I come to you next, please?
Yes, so hello, I'm Christine Wiederkehr. I'm Global Head of Sustainability at Kühne + Nagel. I joined Kühne + Nagel a year ago, and top of my agenda is, of course, the decarbonization of the logistics sector, and especially Scope 3, as we are talking today. And my message is that we really have to act now to make the transition to the 1.5 degree world happen. We are already at 1.5 degrees, so it's really important that we enter into action now. I feel quite comfortable in this round because before I worked 18 years in the consumer industry. I worked for Migros, which is the biggest retailer in Switzerland. And I also was head of sustainability there. And in addition, I'm president of Swiss Recycling, which is the umbrella organization of all the recycling organizations in Switzerland. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Amazing. Thank you, Christine. Michael, could I come to you next, please?
All right. Hello, everyone. And first of all, Hugh, thanks for the opportunity today. I'm Mike Bogovich. I lead the distribution and engineering teams for Ulta Beauty. Ulta is the largest specialty beauty retailer in the U.S., about 44 million active members and 1,400 stores. And under that responsibility is our distribution network, but also our online fulfillment of our e-commerce orders. And really looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks, you.
Amazing. Thanks, Michael. And Matthias, could I come to you, please?
Sure. Thank you very much for having us here. I'm Matthias Bissoy. I'm heading the consumer vertical for Kühne + Nagel. I've been in the logistics industry since actually 1996. Time flies. So very passionate about solutions, not only, of course, environmental and sustainability solutions, but also other solutions, which I actually feel sometimes belongs together. And I guess we will come to that today. Otherwise, I'm also a passionate skier. I love to be in the mountains and walking my dog there as well. And every year I'm in the mountains now, I see glaciers turning smaller and smaller. I think not only from a corporate perspective, but all of us as individuals, I think this is a very critical topic, right? So I really look forward to the discussion today. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Matthias. Now, I'm going to end our poll and share these results. So hopefully you can all see those now. And you can see the breakdown there. And so associated costs too high, that's been the most popular with 33% of our audience selecting that option, followed by lack of cooperation from partners and suppliers. But I think all of these are roadblocks in one way or the other. And so hopefully we're going to have a chance to discuss some of these. I know from looking at our audience Q&A that a lot of people submitted questions to do with costs. And so we're going to be coming to that later on in the webinar. But I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists about their organization's emission reduction journey so far, especially in relation to their supply chains. So what are your targets and what initiatives are you most proud of? You can start with scopes 1 and 2 and then how you're progressing on to scope 3. So I wonder, could I start, Michael, could I come to you first on that question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really proud, as an industry leader of beauty, is how do we take that role as both a partner, but also set the pace and example. We take it serious in our environmental footprint. But so far since last fall, we established a couple things. We introduced our new science-based climate targets to reduce scope 1 and 2, first of all, greenhouse gas emissions by 90% by 2030. In absolute scope 3 GHG emissions, really around covering use of solid products by 28% by 2030 as well. We're 31% decrease in scope 1 and 2 emissions so far since 2019, and 18% in scope 3 category 11. So we feel like we're making some progress as we move through this. Also in our scope 3 commitments that we've made, is that 68% of our Ulta Beauty suppliers for purchased goods or services will have science-based targets by 2027 as well. But we're in a very unique position with over 600 vendor brand partners. The work that we're doing right now is really in partnership with them and their collaboration. If you look a little bit more granular at some of our focus areas, we really have 3 major ones. First is the reduced emissions from consumer use. How do we influence and engage with our partners, our vendors, to build or develop more energy efficient tools such as hair dryers and things like that? But also, when that occurs, how are we going to be the leader in education on that new product, but also its uses, and how, there's a really strong loyalty to cosmetics and the brands and the products that they use. So how do we be a leader there? Also, the second one is around support the industry in adopting low GWP propellants for aerosol and aerosol sprays. Again, working with our partners, their aerosol value chains. How do we bring ingredients and packaging suppliers into the conversation to move from a high GWP propellant to a lower GWP propellant? And then third is really transition to sustainable packaging. So this additional goal that we have is, how do we have 50% of our assortment by weight using recyclable, refillable, made for bio kind of source materials by 2015. And right now we're about 25% of our packaging meets those requirements. And I'm sure as we go further through the questions, we'll talk a little bit more about supply chain, but wanted to lay down kind of the major work of our enterprise, our company, and where we're going. So hopefully that meets that discussion view.
100%, and it's great to hear about some of the progress you're making and kind of managing those commitments and working across your supply chain with your suppliers. And I think it's interesting that 68% target, 68% of your suppliers have science-based targets. Sort of, I can't remember the year you said, but that's a very, very interesting perspective. Roberta, could I come to you next about sort of some of the initiatives that you're working on and the journeys that you've been on so far?
Yeah, absolutely, Hugh. So Scope 3 is about 93% of our footprint, which I think is probably pretty standard. It's the vast majority of most of our emissions, which is, why it's such a challenge. I want to focus in a little bit on the second part of your question, which was what are you most proud of? I think it's a great place to start. I've got a lot of things that I'm proud of that PepsiCo has accomplished. One I can start with is our journey on renewable electricity. So our Scope 1 and 2 emissions are down 33% from our baseline year of 2015, but within that, the Scope 2 emissions are actually down 84%. So we've cracked the code on renewable electricity to a large extent and are engaged in procuring renewable electricity mechanisms in most markets where they're available, while also trying to increase the additionality of the mechanisms that we procure. So super proud of our renewable electricity journey. Another thing I'm pretty proud of, which is a little bit off the beaten path, if you will. I mean, we're implementing tons of GHG emission reduction levers across our manufacturing, across our fleet of vehicles. We have a very large privately owned fleet of trucks in North and South America in particular, working a lot on EVs and low or zero emission vehicles. We're doing biomass in manufacturing. We're doing biomethane, heat recovery, heat pumps, hundreds of projects literally across the globe, if not thousands of projects. But one of the things I'd focus on that I think we're getting much better at, that I'm really proud of, especially the progress we've made in the last year or two, is governance and planning. We have what we call glide paths. So every business unit around the globe has glide paths to achieve our 2030 emission reduction goals. And in this case of, say, for Scope 1 and 2 emission reductions, that's site by site, specific projects, specific technologies, activities that need to be done to get to the goal, along with costs and timing. And that we've come a long way in the level of rigor that our glide paths exhibit, and we're reaping the benefits of that rigor in the form of being able to cost optimize by having that global view of what needs to be done and where. So that's, the governance program here that we've put in place is something that I'm really proud of, because we've made a tremendous amount of progress. Setting the foundation for our delivery.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Roberta. That's really, really exciting to hear. Christine, could I bring in your perspective here from Kuehne + Nagel? Could you tell us a little bit about where you sit in this and some of the journeys you've been on?
My pleasure. So we started to really anchor sustainability in the core strategy. So living ESG, as we call it, it is part of our roadmap 2026. And so really it's integrated in all the core decisions we also do. And of course, therefore, we also have Vision 2030 in respect to sustainability, which is part of that strategy. And our target is 33 absolute emission reduction for all 3 scopes. We also want to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we also would like to have 60% of low emission vehicles in our own fleet, which is almost like the most part of it will be electric vehicles. And I also want to share some storylines we are proud of when we started or along the journey we are standing now. So we already could achieve 100% renewable electricity. We have an 80% LED coverage in our warehousing, and we can cover 20% of our electricity needs by our own site production, which we do by solar panels, and we would like to increase that year by year. And we also really try to have a high energy efficiency, and we are installing smart meters on all the warehousing we have. And we have more than 1,300 sites, so that's quite an investment, but this will help us to really steer and drive the reduction in scope 1 and 2. And of course, I would say, yes, we are quite well underway in scope 1 and 2, as we also heard that from the other panelists. And of course, there is quite a thing to tackle in scope 3. This is the hard to abate thing, I would say, but still we are quite proud on some initiatives there in scope 3 as well. In the logistics sector, we really have to scale sustainable fuels or low emission fuels, as we call it. And we don't have availability and accessibility everywhere. And therefore, we pioneered the book and claim concept for all the transport modes, including electric vehicles. And by book and claim, you really can decouple the physical properties of sustainable fuels from the environmental benefits. So you can decouple that, and the customer can pay for it, for the environmental benefits, and we claim it to the customer who pays for it. And this is just a good solution to really scale sustainable fuels, because they aren't available in all the regions. And this is our main driver to decarbonize scope 3. And we are quite proud that also with this solution, we could double the sustainable fuel sourcing we did between 2022 to 2023. We could double the amount. And I hope now that this journey continues. And of course, we are also very proud that we can serve more than 400,000 customers. And I think what is really important for Kühne + Nagel, that we really find tailored solutions for all of those 400,000 customers, also for sustainability, because they stand at different stages in the sustainability journey. And we really have to find their pain points to help them to decarbonize and to transition to the Paris Agreement.
Of course. And I know that we had a question from the audience about, you talk about having 400,000 customers, you talk about people being at different points in their journeys, and that's something we're going to come back to later, just about how some different kind of companies can approach this. But before we get there, Vincent, could I come to you next and just hear a little bit about what's going on at Tapestry when it comes to these emissions reductions initiatives? What kind of case studies can you share with us at the moment?
Yes, Tapestry is really combating climate change with a program launched a few years ago called Sustain the Planet. We also join all the leading company to drive what we call the Fashion Pact. So fashion companies are really committed into sustainability. So we publish, as a public company, we have a report on sustainability. I think next report will be out in a few weeks for 2024 fiscal year. Our targets are clear: reduce absolute Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emission by 64%, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emission by 42% by 2030 from the 2021 base, where we started to record. We want also to reduce absolute Scope 3, what we call the forest, land, and agriculture flag greenhouse gas emission, 30% by 2030, also from the 2021 baseline, and have a zero greenhouse gas emission across the value chain by 2050. So we are really bold into this commitment, and we want to really lead by example here. I can maybe mention few really bold actions we took. The first one is really to invest into some partners who are really helping to make the planet to be more sustainable. We invested into GenPhoenix in the UK. This company helped us to have access to some leather scrap that we didn't have access before, and help us to recycle this leather scrap into a full recycled leather by hydro entanglement without any glue. So very green product that we can reprocess into the value chain. This partnership is very successful and help us to, as I said, really to touch scrap that we could not have access before. The second thing, you may know that Coach has launched is brand Coachtopia. Coachtopia is a brand under Coach that is selling fully circular product, 100% circular product, which are very successful through the Gen Z customer. And we encounter a lot of success with this initiative. And we all at supply chain and at all company level, we try to continue to have initiative in material, in manufacturing. We try to have an internal competitions of idea on how we can do always better year after year. So we can discuss later about the how we do, but we are trending in a quite a good way today. On Scope 1 and 2 green gas emission compared to FY21, we already reached a 57% decrease at the end of 2023. Again, we will publish the 2024 result soon. And on the Scope 3 forest, land, and agricultural green gas emission, we already reduced by 24%. So we are really encouraged by those results and continue to do better.
So, Vincent, thank you so much. That's really interesting to hear. And the same goes for all of the speakers. I think what we're getting a sense of is so many exciting initiatives going on, you know, that are proactive. The aerosols and packaging, Michael, that sort of you're championing, and then Roberto, you're able to tell us about the renewable electricity and your focus on those glide paths. And Vincent, those 100% circular products, which are actually, you know, really popular with the new generation coming through. So there's a lot of positivity, but also the diversity of all those initiatives just gives us a sense of the massive scale of the challenge that we're facing. And so, Matthias, I kind of wanted to come to you last on this question and just get a sense of, having listened to all of that, what's your perspective here? And when you're talking to customers, like, how do you try and help them on this journey that they're on, that we're hearing about?
First of all, I think what we see in the last few years is much more accountability across the board now. So it's easier to have those discussions collectively, and I think the partnerships are increasing from that perspective. Apart from also what Christina said, I think what we try to do is not only, which is very important, of course, biomethanol and sustainable air fuels and electronic vehicles and those things. I mean, obviously something we have in our fleets and something we are offering our customers, but also how do we optimize together? I think that is a big question, actually. And many of our customers, if you take maybe especially in the fashion and retail industry, have full and very good utilization in containers and so on. But there are also quite a number of our partners that don't. And how do we actually come to that? How can we utilize units better? If everything was transparent, the containers and trucks around the globe, I think actually people would be surprised to see how poorly utilized some of the units are. So how do we actually get to that? And we offer various kind of visibility solutions, obviously, to do that. But more importantly, then, what is the procedure behind it, right? So when do you need something somewhere, and how do we make sure that we optimize units? Also, that we choose the best possible transport mode together. Air freight is indeed absolutely necessary on occasion. But how can we actually be smart and look at the due date and see if there can be other alternatives as well? So it's very much related to what kind of smart solutions we can put in place as well. I think that is a biggie in this question.
Yeah, I think the smart solutions, and then also all of these, so many of these initiatives to do with how you work with your partners and your suppliers, that's kind of a necessary aspect of it, which brings us on to that second question that I want to ask you, which, you know, when we're thinking about Scope 3 reduction initiatives, collaboration with partners and suppliers is such a critical part. But with these vast, complex global supply chains, it goes without saying that this is much easier said than done. So could you give us a scale of this challenge, and also just give us some examples of how you're working with your suppliers and partners to encourage adoption, set standards and expectations, and establish accountability? Roberta, could I come to you first on this one, please?
Absolutely, Hugh. So to give an idea of scale, we have something like 100,000 suppliers worldwide. That's unmanageable and overwhelming. So the first thing that we did is try to cut that down. We estimated emissions based on procured volumes from our suppliers. And believe it or not, we arrived at a number closer to 200 of suppliers that accounted for the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions. That suddenly becomes much more manageable of a number to work with. So having kind of reduced the scale of engagement that we were going to focus on to that kind of top 200, we set about doing several things. First, understanding that we needed to meet them where they were, which in many cases was a much lower level of maturity and sustainability than we were. We set up a couple of capability building programs. For example, one is a program that actually we participate in with a number of other brand companies. It's run by a firm called Guidehouse Consulting, and it's called the Supplier Leadership on the Climate Transition, SLOCT for short. And I call that like climate college. We nominate suppliers to attend, we cover the cost of their attendance, and they attend curated instructor-led programs over a 4 to 6 month period. 2 tracks, very new to climate and a little bit more mature. The new to climate is, what is a greenhouse gas? How do you calculate your emissions? The more mature is, how do you set a science-based target and how do you start decarbonizing? So we've had a couple of hundred of our partners go through that program. And I say when I say partners, I refer to like value chain partners. So it's not just suppliers for us, it's contract manufacturers and it's franchise bottlers. So those are the 3 kind of big categories of value chain partners that we have. So we've got capability building programs that we offer. We also have a program specific to renewable electricity that is free of charge for our partners to participate in. We call it the Renew program, our PepsiCo Positive Renew program. That's 2-part: education on renewable electricity mechanisms and then a opportunity to join us in aggregated power purchase agreements for renewables out in the marketplace. So that's a nice combination of both capability building and bringing them to take direct action to reduce emissions. We also are being very clear on our expectations. So we have a series of specific expectations that we've articulated to our suppliers in particular over the last couple of years. And we have begun incorporating those expectations into actual contract language. One of which is that the supplier set a science-based target for emission reductions. So we've got capability and education, we have tools to take action, we have clear expectations, we have kind of the very visceral addition of contract language. We also are trying to make it easier for them to access the tools and resources that they need through our online platform that we call our Sustainability Action Center. So any of our partners can access that, and it brings them to curated, based on type of partner that they are, curated resources and tools that they can use to advance their decarbonization journey.
That's so interesting. As you just laid out, there was a lot in that answer there with capabilities, tools, expectations, and the other things you mentioned. But I love that it started with going from 100,000 suppliers, if I heard correctly, and then just, okay, well, what are the problematic ones? Okay, there's only 200 of those. So focusing on those, it's a real... it's an interesting exercise. It's very interesting. Michael, I wanted to come to you next because I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question. But I think the S-Locked initiative, I was wondering if that was also something, I think that might have come up in our prep call as well. But yeah, I put the question to you first about the work with your suppliers and partners.
No, I love that part of Roberta's answer. The S-Lot is a big part of what we're doing because I think just to get started, I think people wonder, how do you get started? And there are organizations like S-Lot that are out there that provide, opportunities to learn how to measure or report or ideas to reduce emissions or to establish, the science-based targets that Roberta was talking about. But I think there's also what we are doing a lot of is we have some amazing partners, 600 brand partners, not quite the scale of Roberta's, but as you look at that, we do this space has an incredible amount of innovation in it. So you have a lot of new brands, a lot of new suppliers that are constantly becoming part of that. How do you take S-Lot with being a good partner for these new brands? And if they can come out of the gates on maybe different practices than they establish and then try to change and, as they grow, it might be more difficult. So providing some of the same things that she had talked about to our brands or newer launching brands as well. The other things is how do we challenge or reimagine our supply chain? We are spending a lot of time looking at our supply chain now and say what it looked like yesterday won't be what it looks like tomorrow. And as we look at transformation of our supply chain, we're looking at it from a viewpoint of, yes, get more out of facilities, but can you automate to do different things and make it more efficient that way? I think Christina mentioned solar or LED lighting. I think those are part of it, but challenging our vendors that are helping us build or integrate buildings to pull energy out of the consumption part of our business. Our automation part, if you can turn out the lights on parts of your business and allow the automation to run, we're seeing the benefits of that. More out of the same square footage reduces a lot of other things that are occurring that are byproducts of an expanded supply chain as well. But companies that we continue to work with, Estée Lauder companies and L'Oreal, they are phenomenal partners, very established programs. So we have always, are going to continue to ask a lot of questions and ask for help along the way. But to go even us further back in our supply chain, reimagine how do we move product in the sense that, truck isn't the only way. As our supply chain advances, we're continuing to use rail and other opportunities. There was mention, how do you not fly product? If we can get closer to the guest, over the last few years, we've put up a few more distribution centers as our growth has occurred. But how do you get those closer to markets that can take out the delivery from a DC to a store or DC to a guest and have the capability of already built your store, ship from store locations? We've taken them from 100 or 2 to well over 500 of our store ships. So we're reducing, our footprint, just small incremental steps and capabilities that we have online. And then part of that reimagining is how do we get the company to see the value of supply chain as well as we bring different capabilities that maybe we brought years ago, and really trying to sell that internally and show the power of those investments that you're going to make because of growth with DCs and other things, but how do you make them more efficient? And that may cost you a little bit more upfront, but over time we see that value coming back as we continue to make those more efficient.
Yeah, I guess that's the ideal scenario, is pairing these initiatives with your business initiatives as well. Vincent, I wanted to come to you next and just hear a little bit about how Tapestry is thinking about this, bringing your suppliers and partners with you, setting those standards, encouraging adoption, things like that.
Sure, thank you. Of course, our industry is very different from the food or the cosmetic industry. We could be a bit considered as a bit more traditional, but for us, it was important to, as a leading company in the fashion space, to create a lot of excitement around sustainability, to ensure all our partners and suppliers adhere to the same topic. So the first thing was to make sure we have a clear and updated environmental policy we can share with this supplier network, and a policy that we update, we share every single year with them. And most of the time we realized we had to create capabilities. I heard that as well from probably Roberta or Michael. We need to create capabilities within our supply chain. So we provide trainings, for example. We implement tools like the HIG Facility Environmental Module, because they need to be explained, and we need to drive this. And when we have those tools available, we love KPIs, we love scoring, and so we try to score our supplier against identified target, both per impact area, but also against the HIG Facility Environmental Module. So a few years ago, when we were visiting supplier, we were not talking about sustainability. We were not talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Now, each visit, we talk about it, and we try to create the same dynamism than we have in a company through our supply chain. When it's needed, we also have specific decarbonization program with some suppliers. And the one which we are consuming high energy and carbon emission, we try to have specific program with them. So far it's successful. We create a lot of small competition, and I can say I'm always pleased to see when I see a supplier was invested into a full solar panel to not only provide the electricity necessary for the production, but also give to the community around when we are in the middle in Asia. I consider it that we should encourage that as a partner and give credit to this supplier.
Yeah, and then so again, it's kind of coming through the idea of identifying the problematic suppliers and helping them kind of up their game, I guess. Christine, I wanted to come to you next to get your thoughts. Then Matthias, I'm going to come to you with one of the questions from the audience that was to do with advanced technologies. But Christine, I want to hear a little bit about how your kind of your position at Kuehne+Nagel and your relationships with partners and suppliers and how that's working at the moment.
Yeah, so we really rely on partnerships and collaboration to enter and have progress in the decarbonization journey. And one of the most important reasons is that we are totally asset light. So we don't own any ships. We don't own a lot of trucks given the size we have, and therefore it's really important we have to work through the carriers to really have good solutions in place. And also, as Roberta told, we also most of our emissions lie within Scope 3. It's 98%, almost all lies within Scope 3. And so we really have to work with the suppliers to provide good solutions, but then we have to transition that towards the customer, that they understand what they buy and what they have when they do business with us. And for example, to also, as Roberta laid it out nicely to show the complexity, we also have not 100, but around 50,000 suppliers. And for example, a normal supply chain within Z Logistics, as an example, has 17 touch points. So there you see the complexity we are working with as middleman, middlewoman in the logistics sector. But you also could see it as an opportunity. You have 17 touch points to talk about sustainability and to enter in action and to do action on sustainability. And for example, perhaps I first talk a little bit what we do with the suppliers and then with the customers. With the suppliers, we really enter partnership with carriers, for example. So we try to force the sustainable fuels together with airplane owners and so on to really foster the solutions. And probably you know that there isn't a big availability on sustainable fuel. So we also have to really invest in new technologies there. We do that together with our partners. And for the vessels, we also really try to work with clean vessels. For example, for the Z Logistics side, we really try to work with, or we have preferred partners are really the greener ones, and therefore we really try to provide them greener solutions to our customers. And of course, we also enter a lot of coalitions, where, for example, the Clean Sky Coalition, where we have an ambition to have a certain amount of sustainable fuels in the air sector, for example. So we really rely on collaboration there and enter coalitions and partnerships. And then, as I said, we really have to transfer that to the customer side, and they have to understand what they have with us when they do logistics business with us. And of course, the challenge, so to say, is what we also have seen in the poll, is that there we have the cost challenge, especially with the sustainable fuels. And I think there it's really important that you try to show the professionality, the proficiency you have, what the customer can have with that solution, and that you really have tailor-made solutions. And we started also to talk that we have a starter package with them, that they don't have to start with 100% sustainable fuels. They can start with 10% and then increase it year by year. And therefore, we hope that we have a higher willingness that they come with us on the decarbonization journey, and that it's easier for them to digest, so to say, the premium. And we really are investing in also, that's then a little bit the transition to the next question. We are highly investing in IT tools, in IT solutions, to really have a good backbone that we can guide our customers in the decarbonization journey. Because without data, and we didn't talk about big data today, but that's the big topic as well, which is combined with sustainability. We also talk about the twin transition or the twin movement, right? That sustainability and digitalization really goes together and can have a big impact on that topic.
Thanks. So much insight and interesting takeaways from what you just said, but I really like the idea of rethinking complexity as opportunity. You've got 17 touch points, it's very complex, but that's 17 opportunities to put in implementations and make changes. And you got onto the data question, which we had a few questions from our audience when they submitted. I know there was Wendy who asked, have you leveraged advanced technology at tackling Scope 3 emissions? If yes, please share more insights for examples and where and how it works, successes and lessons learned. So that was advanced technologies. On the data side, David asks, sustainability can only really be solved through data. Do you agree? So very to the point, David. Matthias, I wanted to come to you about the advanced technology point. What kind of tools can our listeners think about? What should they be considering when they're trying to reduce Scope 3 emissions?
Sure, I think visibility is very important indeed. And we have, of course, multiple different tools, as also Christina referred to, in Kühne+Nagel to actually provide carbon footprint impact. The complexity is, of course, big. So very often it's difficult to achieve that truly end-to-end visibility, right? You have origin tracking of some sort, going through a warehouse, going to haulage, loaded into a container. Then you have, of course, a transport string on the ocean. We, of course, link our systems and tools with data from the vessels, from the carriers and everything else. So it tends to be quite accurate. I think, and then you can have different degrees of visibility. We can have visibility down to order item SKU level, or you can have it for your shipment, so to speak. The more important, and I think it was the second question, so is it everything with data? I don't think it is everything, because what is also very important is that you have the standard operating procedures in place. First of all, what is the objective with the data? What do you want to achieve? I think you need to achieve, I mean, visibility is one thing, and year one, you will have one number. What do you do year two? How can we optimize this number to become something else? And I think that's where we try to focus our aim on our solutions, at least, right? And fortunately, very often also carbon footprint reduction goes hand in hand with cost reduction when it comes to optimization, right? So you try to build into the SOPs a certain solution around it. It could be, when do I need my goods somewhere? Back calculating that due date, how do I load it on the origin side? How can we optimize the unit when I load it on the origin side, and so on, right? That's, I think, what you want to achieve with the visibility solutions. So one thing is, yes, we have the tools that actually can provide the data. It's accurate, it's linked to carriers and so on. It's a lot of complexity in getting that data. But in my view, even more importantly, what do you do with the data and how can you optimize further in your supply chain? Yeah.
And as you were talking about data, right, and sort of, the question of like, what are you actually going to do with it? It's not going to solve the problem. So I'm saying I could see Vincent and Roberta just nodding their heads, I think, in agreement. We've got a few other questions from the audience, so I want to get to those as well. We had this one question that's come up, and you kind of touched on it there, Matthias, but managing increased costs, this is such an important part of this whole equation. We had Daryl asking, is the consumer going to face increased price of goods due to Scope 3 reporting? Alistair asks, what are your thoughts on sharing the cost burden to reduce Scope 3 emissions when utilising renewable fuels? Should they be solely on the LSP or the shipper or both? And we had a few other questions like that when it comes to cost. I guess I'm curious to hear sort of some of the thoughts here in the room. Vincent, would you be able to take that question just about cost and tell us a little bit about your thoughts there?
It's a good question. Of course, the goal is to achieve at least cost neutral, and also I truly believe sustainability could be also inclusive in all our companies. The question is, when can we achieve that? And my role as a leader in supply chain is to challenge this, to make sure when we recycle a scrap, to me, it should be we should not pay more for that, because I'm coming to take a scrap from the chain. But it's true at the beginning when you don't have much volume. When you start an operation, you start an initiative, it may seem to cost a bit higher. The idea is to get into the volume to ensure the program can be cost neutral one day, and choose the right program for that. So I'm not giving up. One day I'm sure we'll be cost neutral and even inclusive.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I jump in on that? Yeah.
Please do, yes.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I mean, this all comes, much of what we need to do is coming at a cost. So I can share a little bit about how PepsiCo thinks about cost, managing costs, we do have a big focus on costing down solutions, both for ourselves, and much of the cost down activities that we do is applicable to particularly our franchise bottlers who have much of the same process equipment that we do. But things like making sure that you're leveraging government incentives and grants. We've scaled up our internal ability to do that pretty significantly in the last year or two. That can have significant benefits in reducing overall costs. Like I'm talking 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50% cost reduction. Another avenue that we explore is bulk buying or pre-buying. So if we know that we're going to need 50 heat pumps, let's not buy them one by one. Let's find 2 vendors, global vendors, and buy them all at once and negotiate a better deal. We also are very aware and focused on the fact that energy efficiency for all of our process equipment and our utilities needs to be first and foremost, because the less energy you use, the smaller the piece of kit you need to replace that energy source. So if you're not super energy efficient, and then you go out and buy and try to install a biomass boiler to replace your natural gas boiler, for instance, you're over-engineering and you're overpaying. So that's a set of activities that we take. And then from a governance standpoint on cost, we look at every emission reduction lever across scope 1, 2, and 3 in terms of dollars of cost per ton of GHG reduction. So we're really doing, a marginal abatement cost curve for all of our reduction levers with data pulled from those glide paths that I referenced earlier. So that enables us to cost optimize basically globally. If a solution has we actually do dollars of NPV per ton of impact. So if it has a somewhat less bad and negative dollars of NPV per ton of impact in Brazil than in Australia, let's do the project in Brazil, and we'll do something that's cheaper in Australia for Australia. So really looking at it in terms of dollars per ton of impact and prioritizing and scheduling execution in that way has proven to be very useful for us.
Thank you so much, Roberta. That's really, really interesting. We're coming towards the end, but there's a question from the audience that I also really wanted to put to Christine. It was about smaller brands. It's from Angelica. Angelica, thank you for your question. For smaller, in this case, UK fashion brands, but I think for smaller brands in general, what are the practical first steps to begin reducing Scope 3 emissions in the supply chain? So given their size, how can they leverage suppliers, choose materials, or implement sustainable practices without the leverage or resources of larger companies that they might have?
Yeah, so what I would suggest, or how we would tackle that, at least for the logistics sector, would be that we really try to start with measuring and showing where they stand, right? So really measure their greenhouse gas emissions. And there, of course, we can leverage all our knowledge we have and our proficiency in showing them what are their CO2 emissions for at least the transport activities they do, and where would we focus then with measures, because it's very important that you also focus, because we have all those cost discussions we had before, so you really have to focus on those measures which have the highest impact on CO2. And this you can only do if you have an in-depth analysis on all your emissions, and then you see where the focus is, right? And then we start there, and we have quite some nice tools that you really, as Matthias told us, end to end. So you really can see along your whole supply chain how much emissions were emitted with the pre and on carriage, with the main carriage, with the trucking and so on. So you really see it, and then you can decide where I would like to start with my measures. So this, I would say, is a really important first step. And then, of course, I would say trust is also very important. Of course, with all the customers we have, but especially with smaller ones, because they have to trust in our knowledge we have with sustainability. And for this reason, to get that trust, we are really happy to also show them in a real case how that works. So we say, so we can do a lot of presentations, but let's do it. So let's take your product and ship it, and we show you every step and how that looks like on the sustainability solution, and then you see it. So it's not talking all the time, it's really showing and doing it. And there, in this respect, we gained a lot of customers then also on a smaller customers for sustainability solutions, because we really put it in real life and showed them what we can do. And this is something which I would suggest that, yeah, you really showcase the topics and don't only do webinars or presentations, so to say, to really put it in real world. That's what I would like to say. So really act and do stuff.
Yeah, takeaways, actions speak louder than words. I definitely see your point. But thank you so much for that answer, Christine. I hope that was useful for Angelica. We're going to come on to our final question now. This is an ongoing journey with new obstacles appearing all the time. So for organizations to meet these targets and to reduce their Scope 3 emissions, multiple initiatives need to be executed and managed and ultimately be successful. I'm sure many in our audience will be thinking about the scale of the challenge they face. So could I ask our leaders in this webinar just to share what have you learned so far that you're able to share with our audience, just in terms of lessons and takeaways and attitudes and mindsets? Michael, could I start with you, please? And we've got just a couple minutes left, so let's go for 30 seconds per insight.
Yeah, no, thanks. I would say, Christine mentioned is get started. I think you could overthink it early, is really get going quickly. And I think now it's more of a cross-functional partnership too, is, it's not just one person that has this focus on sustainability. Everyone in the room has to have a kind of a same end state goal to improve not only our cost structures or other things, but how do you have goals that improve your sustainability as you go? And then I would say take partners. All of us have talked about how the large size of our supply chains is. There are folks in there doing it really well. Is how do you take them early and often and not be like you're burdening them or too proud to ask and use SLOT and things like that to get started.
Thank you, Michael. Matthias, can I come to you next, please?
Sure. Challenge, Michael said earlier. I think that is a good thing. Meeting customers, start challenging already before an opportunity to actually also focus on sustainability. Partnerships is the next thing I wanted to say. Probably we can improve in our industry also working together as companies. It could be two of our customers working together. We could be an enabler in that. So how can you optimize supply chains, fully utilizing containers better and those kind of things. I think we need to work across boundaries and find solutions also for that. That way, I think we would optimize much more and be more successful going forward to reach the 1.5, which we are not at right now, actually. So.
Amazing. Thank you, Matthias. Roberta, any final inspiring messages for our audience?
Sure. I mean, we all operate inside machines. Our companies are machines. So my advice is leverage the power of the machine whenever and wherever you can. A couple examples are HR. That's a part of the machine. Leverage HR to put emission reduction objectives in everybody's annual objectives. leverage the power of the finance machine, get into their processes and align your investment requests with the broader investment programs that are happening in the company. So integrate sustainability into the workings of the machine that you live and breathe in.
Amazing. So don't rage against the machine, but leverage the machine. I like that as a takeaway. Vincent, could I just come to you for your final thoughts?
Yeah, quickly, fully aligned with my colleague here on the webinar, all the actions we can do. What my learning is, it's happening. We are moving the needle, I think. So we should not be discouraged by that. Any actions is really impactful. We need to continue to work in a partnership. And the notion I would like to introduce here is more, it's a kind of healthy competition, this whole topic on climate change. It's a very nice competition, and we can learn also among all of us the best practice. So we should leverage on that, I think. There's not good enough competition than help the planet.
And Christine, I'll let you have the final word, your final takeaways and lessons that you've learned along the way.
So my key takeaway would be to engage first with like-minded people. And there, I mean, especially on the Kühne + Nagel side with like-minded customers. We did an analysis how many of our customers have ambitious climate targets, and the highest share was in the consumer industry. So therefore, we are really happy to be here, and we feel that we are like-minded people in this industry here. And I think it's also really important, as I said, to focus also. There could be customers who don't have a sustainability awareness. You can do it, but first engage with like-minded people, because then you have faster solution. And then to finalize, we really need, like we as a sustainability people, we really have to drive the change. I think we are change maker in our organizations. And we have to drive awareness that if we don't go into action now, the cost will be much higher afterwards. We entered now in some climate risk analysis, and we saw what we have for risks when there is flooding and high temperature, and what kind of investments we would have to do to mitigate those risks. So better act now and make it happen.
Thank you, Christine. A sobering thought to end on, but at the same time, you've all shared so many interesting and exciting insights about initiatives that you're working on, that there is excitement and there are opportunities, as you said. Rethink complexity as opportunity early on. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, all of my 5 brilliant speakers that have joined this webinar today. Thank you so much for your input. Thank you to our audience for attending. There will be the chance to leave feedback in a survey that will be available after this poll. Please join us again for our next webinar. We'll let you all know about it. Thank you again, and goodbye.
Thanks.